There we go. We're going to try this again.
Problem
we were
solved.
up. People see, I'm sure people seeing us, right? Anyway, here we are. I hit live. We went live and it did not go live. So I don't know what the hell just happened. Here we are, guys. We're going to start this all over again, and you're not going to get an intro because I did an intro to a crowd that was not here. So, holy cow. All right. Well, how are you, Nate?
I'm doing good. How about you, Tim?
Great. We just had a great discussion, and I'm thinking I didn't hit go live twice like I'm supposed to. I don't know, but here we are. Don't know. Yeah, everybody, I was getting these messages, and anyway, so we're good. All right, let's dive in. So, who is Tim Gault? Yeah, who is Tim Gault indeed? So the first question I'm going to ask you, since everybody else didn't hear our discussion, was post-apocalyptic or dystopian? Where does this book fall?
This is definitely dystopian. It's not a shit hit the fan because you never see the aftermath.
Right.
This is, you see everything up to the beginning, where going home was the first 5 seconds into the book, the shit hits the fan, where this is the end of the book is the shit hits the fan.
This could be one of the few books that actually takes place during what we're going to call the apocalypse. You know how we always, there it is, pre-apocalyptic. Yeah. That's what I was looking for, because a lot of times that the collapse is the most interesting part in a book series or a movie series. Mm-hmm. And then when they get into the post-collapse, it's just kind of boring rote survival. Whereas this is more of, we actually get to experience it for 64 wonderful hours of audio or reading or whatever you want to call it, which I love. So, all right. So we're not going to go back and recap. We're going to start with chapter 4. And since we already did it, we're going to pretend like we didn't do it. And the contractor, McNamara, who Dagny was completely waiting on, he was supposed to finish the Rio Norte line. He had a reputation of next to none. He was a great guy, had a bunch of contracts, and he up and disappeared just like that.
Yep.
And we figure, what did you say about him, Nate?
He was the first professional person, or first person with deep pockets to walk away in the book.
Completely disappear, to not really say, hey guys, I'm thinking about quitting. It was just, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, that becomes a theme throughout the entire book, doesn't it, Nate?
Right. Absolutely. And you'll start seeing the names roll and roll and roll. And it's like, it kind of gets fun once you start seeing how the shit starts going downhill.
Because we don't, and we're, of course, no spoilers beyond chapters 4 through 6 for anybody, but we definitely don't find out what's going on until well into the third act of the book. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. This book reads like a really deep, unraveling mystery that you don't find out a whole lot until, like I said, deep into the third act, and you're waiting, and you're like, am I really going to find out? So
yeah. So anybody who is just starting this book, the first 3 chapters, there's not a whole lot. The second 3 chapters, there's quite a bit that you need to pay attention to, because if you don't pay attention to the little details, you're going to miss the big details at the end of the book.
Absolutely, 100%.
Because she doesn't repeat herself.
No. And I like that a lot about Ayn Rand, is she just, there would be the temptation in a book this long to every so often go back and recap what's happened. But she doesn't. She just keeps moving along like a freight train, not a fast moving one, but a freight train nonetheless, and you deal with it. So after McNamara disappears, one of my favorite things in these first 6 chapters happens. And that is when the state of Mexico decides they're going to nationalize the San Sebastian mines and the San Sebastian Railroad. Yep. Why don't you tell us what happens when that happens, Nate?
So what really gets me is you start to realize the takers versus the makers.
Mm-hmm.
And Dagny is definitely the maker of, that whole deal, where she had the foresight to see that this is going to happen while her brother Jim was betting on a huge payday from this, and got really, really, really pissed off when he found out there's only like one locomotive and 3 cars down there, and they're only running like one freight train every 3 days.
And I think it was an old wood burning one is what she replaced, which
yes,
it was. She said she found the oldest junk she could find.
Yes. And then once it goes south, he takes all the credit for it.
Yep. So
but he's not the person that needs to be taking the credit for it.
So there's a pretty interesting dichotomy in these first couple of chapters. In this chapter here, number 4. So Dagny, she goes early on and she sees that the San Sebastian mines are going to be a literal money pit. She pulls all their big gear out of there and says, let's run the cheapest stuff we can so we won't lose it. When it gets lost, her brother panics and he goes to his board and he's like, oh, I knew this was going to happen all along. And you know what I did? And he takes credit for Dagny's forethought. Then at the end of this chapter, Wyatt Ellis shows up and gives Dagny shit. And he's like, you run this company like this, and I'm going to take my business elsewhere. And you know what she doesn't do? The entire conversation, she never once blames it on her brother. She accepts responsibility for it, and she says, we'll make it right. So her brother takes credit for her good stuff, and she won't even give him credit for the bad stuff he did.
Right. And also after that, she made the phone call to Hank to actually get all of the rail ordered for that line.
And she, not just to get it, but they had originally said 12 months is what he said. She comes back to Hank and she's like, can we do it in 9? He's like, sure, but it's going to cost you 20%.
Yeah, $20 extra a ton. So the one thing we're missing in between, so between McNamara leaving and Ellis showing up at her office and the San Sebastian lines, you're missing the anti-dog eat dog bill that went through.
Yes, and what was that, Nate?
So that is anybody cannot, or everything has to be put into a pool and spread evenly across, so nobody can take more profit out of basically doing the work.
It's a bit, it's not a very clear piece of legislation.
No. It's not even legislation. It's an agreement within the railroad.
Good point. You're right. That's right. And as they're passing it, everybody because here's the thing, it's a piece of, I don't know, binding. Exactly. Yeah. Collectivism is what Martinson family said. And yes. And as they're there, everybody realizes that it is horrible for everyone else's bottom line, including their own. But everybody keeps saying, well, I think someone else might vote against it. I'm not going to stand up. Let's let somebody else vote against it, you know?
Right. And it was all passed unanimously, if I remember. I think there's only, I think the only one that was Conway, Dan Conway, and he's the guy that ran the Durango, if I remember. Right.
Yep. It's so Dagny hears the rules. She rushes to see Dan Conway. I had written down president of the Phoenix Durango, which is the one that that's the shiny, fast railroad that's supplying all the gear to the guys in Colorado. And she urges him to fight the resolution. And he's just like, Dagny, I'm tired. I can't do it.
Yep.
And it was a shame because it was funny. Dagny starts talking about it. She says, I was really looking forward to having a fight with you. She's like, I would have put you out of business if I could. I would have undercut you at every point. I would have loved to have done that. But she makes a comment or a kind of internal monologue where she felt like a looter at that moment because it was like she was getting something she wanted, but she didn't have to work for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely see that struggle in her head where she doesn't want to be taken as one, but there's things that happen as they go along that unfortunately can do that.
Absolutely. So where did the, oh yeah, there it is. Hunter says earning versus looting. And that is an early on that, I mean, so for those who don't know, these are two of the big themes in Ayn Rand's literature. And the big one is looters. And basically a looter would be
government,
socialist, government. Yeah. I mean, Hank Rearden's family would be looters, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anybody who takes without giving, anybody who takes something they didn't work for, anybody who takes something that they didn't earn is considered a looter. And I would say in Ayn Rand's look on life that they would be probably the most evil people. Would you say that? Looters?
Yeah, in the book, definitely. I would say in her mind they are, they're the worst people they can be.
I think so. So Nat said, let's talk about this for a minute. Nat, the preparedness guy, not Nate from Two Chicks Homestead, said Conway acted in good faith. That only works with honorable people, but swindlers took advantage of his good character.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Because he does say, though, he was there and he was waiting for someone else to vote, right? So
yeah, he wanted somebody else to vote, and he started because he wanted the competition.
Right.
So, what honorable person doesn't want competition?
Well, and again, when you look at Ayn Rand's personal philosophy, competition, hard work, those are two of the biggest principles that she lands on. And so it makes Conway a good person who, like Nat said, was basically just taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you have Hank, who spent 10 years trying to come up with this new metal. That's honorable, hardworking person.
And you know what? So here's a good example of this. So when Hank says to Dagny, he's like, yeah, I will supply you with the metal, but it's going to cost you this much extra. And she accepted it. And at that point, the two of them were there looking at each other as equals. Hank says he didn't normally see a woman like that in his world. And it was like last night. So I ended up having to go out late to fix a broken water line. I call my plumbing company, awesome guys. And Chad's like, yep, I'll be there if you'll give me a hand. Sure, why wouldn't I? Because he was all by himself, And when we were all said and done, I told him, I said, you make sure you charge us, and you charge us really, really well, because you did everything you could. I mean, why shouldn't you be rewarded for that? Anybody who thinks you shouldn't be is probably a looter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that was kind of the highlights of chapter 4 for sure. And so we move into chapter 5, and this is where it's a little bit fun, because the government of Mexico becomes outraged when they find out that Francisco, and for those who don't know who Francisco de Cunha is, was that right? De Cunha? Is that right?
D'Anconia, I think.
D'Anconia or whatever. I'll probably pronounce it wrong 12 times. But anyway, he's the one who invested in the San Sebastian mines to begin with. The government of Mexico loots them from him. And guess what? There ain't no copper in there, was there, Nate?
Yeah. And he knew there wasn't any copper in there. And his excuse. So what I really enjoyed about this chapter was the story of Francisco and all the things that he's done.
Right.
So yes, the whole thing you find out about the fact that there's no money in the mines, and Francisco spent $40 million or $15 million of his own money. Yep. And everybody else that invested in him lost 40 to 50 million. But those are all people like Jim Taggart, Orrin Boyle. So that, like, the bigwigs that you see sitting off to the side doing absolutely nothing were the ones that invested. And then it gets down to, you see what's going through Francisco's head.
Or at least we start to. We don't know why it is, though. That's the crazy thing.
Right. And you're not sure exactly what's going on, but you see where he was raised as a kid, always hardworking. So she starts to build his work ethic as it goes on.
Right.
And then this happens and it's like, what the fuck's going on?
Absolutely. Because so you've got here, and to kind of paint the picture for those who are out there, you've got a guy who right now would maybe be the equivalent of like what Charlie Sheen was during his 2.5 Men days.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Had money, but just didn't care. I guess Charlie Sheen even came from a family of wealth, kind of, but that's really what he was.
I would say Robert Downey Jr.
Sure. Yeah.
Would be better than Charlie Sheen.
Right. But we don't really know how, because, okay, let's go back a ways, because Ayn Rand opens it up and she talks about how Francisco is getting a divorce. It's a big political, or a big kind of Hollywoodish scandal, that sort of thing. Then we hear about all
right. So it wasn't a divorce. She was divorcing somebody else.
Supposedly, did I miss that? Okay.
Supposedly that was a mistress.
Now that makes sense. I couldn't. Okay. Yep. This is twice I've listened to this and I couldn't figure out why it said that Francisco came to the city to observe his divorce, but it wasn't his divorce. It was his mistress's divorce.
I'm 99% sure that's how that ran. Maybe Nat could confirm that, but
that makes sense. That does.
Because he makes it to the point where he wasn't with her when that whole divorce trial was going through.
Right.
So
that makes sense. Okay. But this is somebody that the author just spent the last, half a chapter, and so it wasn't his mistress for real, but it was implied that he was the mistress in the papers. That's what Joseph was saying. And that makes sense. Yeah. So here's the thing. You've got somebody who is looked at right now as a playboy, who is wasting away his family's money, who is going on yachts with ladies, that sort of thing. But at the same time, and here's as Nat says, she set up the contradiction, because we get half a chapter of hearing stories of there was Dagny and her brother and the friend. What is the friend's name again? Do you remember? He's the assistant now.
Eddie Willers.
Yeah. So you got those three growing up together with Francisco. Francisco, from a young age, sneaks in and becomes works on a rail line when he's underage, so that he can get it, eventually buys his own mines, I believe it was.
Yeah, buys his own mine and also holds over Dagny's head that he started working for Nat Taggart before she did.
Right, which he loved to mention on multiple occasions. And the dude they built this entire lift system over 2 summers that would allow them to get up to the top. It was basically so they could get up to the top of a cliff and jump off into the water, right?
Yep, absolutely. And he didn't have schooling by then. He was just a kid. And 100%. He figured out all this algebra and geometry and all this other stuff. And he'd never had any formal education on that.
It was great, because Dagny's father looked at his calculations and he was like, oh, I guess he's right. And then we get another story of Francisco on the motorboat. Remember, he'd never used it, never been trained on it, hopped in and just drove away like a maniac.
Yeah. That was when Jim couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. And then going a little bit more forward, we start finding out that Francisco and Dagny were lovers, her only lover at this point.
Yep.
And toward the end of this chapter, we find out that I think it's kind of implied earlier on, but he didn't just break her heart, but he left her. Like, he just abandoned her and basically said, I'm going to do things that you are not proud of, and you're going to think it's not me.
Right. And that's that's where this starts to come into play with the mines, because he screwed a lot of people on the mines, and yeah, it hurt a lot of people.
Yep. And for whatever reason, and again, at this point, we're not afforded what his motivations are, but for whatever reason, at this point, he's pretty proud of himself for doing that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we couldn't really figure out, we didn't really know what was going on there, right? So you did answer my question about, was Francisco there to observe his divorce or the copper mine fiasco? And I guess when it comes down to it, we know he was really there to see everybody being pissed off about getting losing their money in the copper mines, right?
Yep.
And Francisco thinks it's awfully funny, like we said, that, you know, he lost 15 million, which was, you know, a drop in the bucket compared to the 40 plus million that some of the other folks lost. So, you know, there was that. And spends quite a bit of time in Dagny's kind of head, you know, laying out the fact that Dagny is completely lost as to how Francisco could have become such a playboy instead of the businessman he is. What do you think, if you had to guess, or if you had to step inside of her head at that point, what do you think she would have thought about Francisco and why he did what he did?
Well, I think most of the Playboy stuff is more in the media than anything. So he can play that persona because he's the businessman and he's got the cash to do it.
Right.
And
might have lost you a little.
I think Dagny's kind of pissed off at him a little bit. Oh,
that's what I was thinking.
I think Dagny's kind of pissed off at him, but it's not not that big of a deal yet.
I mean, he broke her heart. I think she's let, you know, whatever broke, I think she's let cement over the years. Like I think she's decided that she has no interest in, at least up until this point, of course, relationships or men. She just wants to work. I believe it was I think it's the next. Yeah, no, it was this chapter where Dagny's mother, when their kids, throws a ball for her, and Dagny has zero interest. I want to call her a tomboy, but she's more than that a little bit, because she's not just, I want to play with, I want to play baseball and I want to get dirty with the boys. She doesn't even want to deal with the boys. She wants to be a business person. Right.
Absolutely. You know, she's there to make her money and run a business and have a little bit of fun. So that's what she wants.
And there's a conversation where she talks about, right here, that's Sandy. I love having Sandy in here. She says, Dagny sees beneath the surface, but still can't fathom the reason he does what he does. So go back a little bit further. Dagny has always been the type to look beneath the surface. And she's one of the few, I guess you would call them enlightened folks in Ayn Rand's world, because she's one of the few, again, at the event when she went to that party that her mother threw for her. That evening, I think when she goes home, her mother's like, oh, you're still in your dress. And she's like, I don't understand. Why do people do this? Why do they go to these parties? Everything just felt hollow to her. And, you know, Dagny's mother in some instances was a lot like Hank Reardon's wife, you know, just that they were socialites who lived within that world and they were happy with it. But Dagny's seen right through it. And she's one of the few that really did that, you know? And I like that. I like that. I like that Ayn Rand went back and painted quite a picture of their childhood, and it hopefully shows what motivates them. And of course, as we go along, so Nat says, I'm chewing at the bit to talk about spoilers. We all are. We're going to try our damnedest not to spoil. But yeah, it makes more sense once you've read the entire book for sure. But it's cool. Like, I love how she continues to drop these breadcrumbs of mysteries that everybody's like, do I want to, because it was fun. I loved reading it for the first time here last year. Yeah. Because I had no sweet friggin' clue what was going on. You know, I'm like, where are these people disappearing to? Why is Francisco acting like this? None of it made any sense, but it was super intriguing.
Yeah. It's definitely one that will get you thinking about it. And anybody, if this is your first time through, you need to go through it probably 2 more times to even catch 75% of the book.
Oh, 100%.
So there's just
I mean,
so much little stuff.
I'm only working through it on my second time, and there's so much. I mean, there's things that I'm catching after reading it this section the second time after you explain it to me. You know, I mean, it's kind of fun. I love it. It's the rare instance where if you haven't read this, it's worth it, because you know you always say about your favorite movies, you'd love to be able to go back and experience your favorite movie for the first time again. And I knew 3 or 4 hours into this book that it was going to be a special experience that I hadn't done before, and I really wish I could go back and read this book for the first time again. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Hunter's got it right there. That is it right there.
Go ahead and read it, Nate. Tell me why.
Agreed. The boring parts get interesting after a few times through. So you get all the big plot as you're going through this, and then you start to pick up all the little nuggets, like the bracelet at...
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about that too.
The bracelet at the anniversary party. So
right.
you guys remember that bracelet that Hank made and gave to his wife? Well, that bracelet comes back in chapter 6 during the engagement party, and boy, does it cause a shit stir.
Yes. Whose engagement party is that? Is that her brother's?
Or not engagement. That's
anniversary party.
Anniversary. Thank you. Anniversary party.
Boy, that was an uncomfortable. Is it possible to, like, I don't know. I gotta say, I think Hank's wife, to me, is the meanest, the genuinely most evil person in this entire book, I think. Oh, how we doing? We okay now?
Yep, we're good now. I would agree with that. You know, she is not a nice person. She's very vindictive. And later on in the book, you'll see what happens.
Yep. Yes,
there's definitely a big scene further on down. But I think she was doing more of an embarrassment to, or like putting her husband's work down. Her husband is the guy that is paying for all of this shit. And she is doing nothing but talk down his accomplishments.
Right.
During their party.
And there's a lot that's, oh, well, you know what? That's a shame, Hunter. I'm sorry of that. He says his ex, for those who, you know, someone else who talked them down, and nobody ever deserves that. You know, I mean, it's cool because I get, when I was at Nate and Aaron's house, you can see how great you guys work as a partnership and a team, you know, and, you know, Becky and I are the same way. And when you don't have that in your life, it really, man, it's tough to be. I'm sorry. I can only imagine it would be tough because I haven't, you know, thank goodness I have never been in that situation, but man, that's miserable.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. You know, we wouldn't be, I wouldn't have half the stuff I have right now if it wasn't for my wife.
Right. Because they keep us in line.
Yeah, exactly. You know, she's the voice of reason, and I'm the one who spend every single fucking dollar we own.
100%. Just want to shout out Nat's dropping out this evening, and I always love when Nat's in here. Nat, the preparedness guy, guys. He's a good member of the community, and I think the world of him. We've actually spent time together. So follow him up on Instagram or YouTube. The Nat, the preparedness guy. He's got great stuff. And I also see tonight Cold War Preppers in here as well. He's been on the show before. He's got a great channel. He has his own version of the Post-Apocalyptic Book Club, and they do quite a bit of stuff over there. So give him a follow. Always love seeing him in here. And Chris Dixon says, Hank brought this on himself with his vacancy. So we talked about this in the last episode, and we might as well talk about it again, because it's not, you know, Hank's not innocent in this scenario by any means. It is a miserable situation that all of them are in. But she is definitely willing to sit back and feed off the fruits of Hank's labor while at the same time tearing every bit of it down. And it is Oh, yeah. Awful.
Mm-hmm.
Hunter
And
says after getting worn down for so long.
yeah. And so the whole thing with the bracelet, she's showing this thing around and says, this thing is so ugly. I don't like it. It doesn't go with me. I would give it up for a diamond bracelet in a heartbeat.
Right.
So Dagny is standing a few feet away, hears it, and she's wearing a diamond bracelet. So she ends up taking the bracelet off and handing it over and going, give me the Reardon steel bracelet and you can have this. And it doesn't make Dagny look like the greatest person in the whole world. But
that is true as well, but Dagny doesn't care.
Right, exactly. And once that all calms down and the party comes to a close, Hank and his wife are in a room together, and Ayn Rand makes a very good point that they don't sleep in the same room.
Right.
So they have separate bedrooms, and this is the first time in like 5 years, maybe 10 years, he's been in her bedroom.
Right. I forgot about that.
So he goes in there, has a discussion with her, and say, if you ever have a party again, don't invite who you assume are my friends.
Isn't that something? They're just such a miserable couple. And to have his brother and his mother living there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yes, you can blame her on Hank being absent, but the brother and the mother have no excuse to treat him like that. Not a bit. And
right.
They're just this. Yeah. I knew people like them growing up, and they're just this like little sewing circle of sitting around and, and so I don't know. It's tough. I hate seeing it because you feel for Hank, even though, hey, he brought some of this on himself, but he doesn't deserve what she puts him through. Not by a mile.
No, not at all.
So, of course, Hank doesn't want to go to this party, which we know. And he's like, well, I agreed to it back 6 weeks ago when they put me on the spot. So I guess I'm going to go.
Yep.
And I believe just before or during the party, he finds out that the superintendent of his rolling mills resigned suddenly without explanation as well.
Yes. And I just caught that this go around.
Yeah, I did too. I forgot that he'd been affected by it. Now I know it was only my second reading, but so there's another one. Hardworking dude who sounded like had been with Hank for many years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just up and quit.
Noped right out of there. He's like, all right, but boys, I'm out. And this, again, if you're not getting the hint, this becomes a very quick moving thing as the story goes along. Every time you think somebody's there, they might be, they might not be. You never know, right?
Yep. And there is once you get a little bit further in, things start to move a little bit closer. Have you ever noticed that as people disappear, the plot gets closer and closer and closer?
It doesn't go as fast, you mean? Like it all happens in short waves? Or?
You're not seeing it from the third person.
Okay.
You're seeing it from the first person.
I can see that,
as it goes on.
It's interesting. I like that. And Yosick says it doesn't really matter anyway because who is John Galt? Yeah. And if anybody hasn't caught that yet, almost every chapter ends with who is John Galt, or most of them, or close to it. And I am immensely impressed with how many different ways Ayn Rand can include who is John Galt and make it work in the dialogue. It's actually quite impressive. Oh, so Sandy says, I think Hank married Lillian under false pretenses. She showed him what he wanted to see to catch him.
He even says that in the book. So
I can go with that.
That is in there.
I mean, if anybody out there knows, I mean, Sandy's read this book so many times, she even has the t-shirt to prove it. So yeah, she is an expert on this book for sure. I can see that.
I am pretty sure that is explained in the book.
Okay. I think it's mentioned. Yeah. No, you're okay. You're good. So Dagny is a little bit put off at the party because I guess the term I wrote down was Hank treats her with rigid formality. He has, I think even at this point, and it's pretty obvious what's going to happen between them because, just there is at least mutual admiration there for sure between the two of them. And I think she wanted to have kind of some conversation with Hank, and he just treated her like any other Joe, didn't she?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think it put her off a little bit. That's how I took it away anyway. Right. Yozik says, yeah, there's a section on how they meet and got together. I thought I remembered that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And I know Francisco showing up was also a big deal because Hank didn't invite Francisco and he didn't even want to see him.
Not even a little bit. So let's talk a little more about, I guess, I don't know which order it comes in, but let's talk about the bracelet first. Mm-hmm. So to set the scene for those who are out there, like Nate said, Lillian is walking around pretending to make a big deal out of this Reardon metal bracelet that she doesn't like, and she's basically trying to embarrass Hank, and Dagny calls her out on her bullshit. And there's nothing better than when a manipulator gets called out on their bullshit and they have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they, Hank gets in the middle of it. Don't they get a little bit, not handsy, but at least wordsy with one another?
I think so. I think there was a few snide remarks from Hank towards.
That's what I thought too. I was pretty sure. So it was a very uncomfortable situation that, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Let's put it that way.
It was one of those things you wouldn't want to be in the room for, but you want to be a fly on the wall.
Oh man, especially nowadays. If it were recorded, wouldn't that be great? Somebody with an iPhone, right?
Yep.
But it was good. And then just as soon as that ends, Hank's standing over in one corner and he looks off to the entrance, and there is Francisco, who wasn't invited by anybody, was he?
I don't think he was. But Lillian made it sound like you can't have a party without him.
Right. And I was wondering if she was playing off on it a little bit, like, Francisco showed up, I can't do much about it. Or if she legitimately invited him because she knew it would kind of piss Hank off, maybe.
Right. There's no, I didn't catch anything clear that who invited Francisco, but it kind of led me to believe she might have, or maybe somebody else that we don't know invited him.
Well, that's what I was wondering too. Or maybe he has his little minions, or, Sandy says she had to have invited him. She said, Hunter said, I think she made sure Francisco knew.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I'll go with that. I think so too, because how else would he have found out about the party?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's possible, but so Hank tells Lillian, I don't want to talk to him. Keep him away from me. What happens? Francisco walks right up to him and decides, hey, let's have a conversation.
Because he's been avoiding him.
Exactly. Yeah, he knows. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to walk over there and we're going to have a conversation. Do you remember much about that conversation, Nate?
Not entirely. Not this go around.
That's okay. I was going to, so the basic gist of what Francisco talks to Reardon about is, I guess it's two things. Number one, watch your back. And number two, you need to get rid of all the looters in your life. Mm-hmm. And those looters were, hey, I think we got somebody to add to the stage here. Let's bring him on as soon as he shows up. Mr. Byron Roberts, how are you, brother?
Good. How y'all doing?
There we go. How's it going, Byron?
Better late than never. Hey, brother.
Busy Sarah.
We'll get you on here. Give me, we're going to finish chatting about this. So the conversation between Francisco and Reardon, and he's like, hey, you need to get rid of your looters in your life. And it was very, I don't know. I don't even know how to put it, but it was almost like he was saying two things at once,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was more. Now that I remember, it was more like, "Be careful because they're coming for you."
Right.
And that is exactly where I was going with it, Martinson. That it was.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you know what goes on later on in the book, yes.
Well, even if you don't, you could look at it as he's bringing him to his side. I need an ally in this world, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's also Reardon needs copper.
Right.
So for this alloy that he's going to be making for Dagny.
And if he can't get copper, he ain't going to be able to make it. So he needs to make allies somewhere. And if there's one thing that Reardon is really bad at, it's making allies.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I definitely think it was we need to talk businessman to businessman.
Yes.
And here's a heads up that somebody's coming for you.
110%. I agree. Well, let's talk about the very last thing that happens in this chapter. And then I got a couple of questions to ask everybody. But the last one is, and it's almost a throwaway, but we finally find out, or somebody mentions Ragnar. Now, can somebody try to pronounce that for me?
Ragnar Daniskold.
Daniskold. Okay. So we finally find out about somebody who becomes very important as we go along. Mm-hmm. And Byron, have you read this book? You have read it through before, have you?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to share a little bit about what Ragnar is without spoiling it?
Well, I don't remember a whole lot about it because that was back when I first started kind of prepping and everything, and that was just, this is more all refresher, right?
That's okay.
I feel like a first-time reader again, really.
I'm kind of the same way, but I would say he was more like
more things, I guess. Like y'all was saying earlier, you almost need to read it a second time to catch all the little
100%
nuances and the subtle hints to the towards it for the ending of the book.
So what they did mention in here was that he was a pirate or maybe a privateer. I always like privateers better; they sound better. But anyway, he was.
Think he's on the water.
Yeah, he was a pirate who would steal the wealth. I didn't catch this the first read around, and this is just awesome. I love this line. It said he would steal the welfare payments that the United States were sending to peoples around the world, and no one's been able to catch him. Mm-hmm. What in the hell was the U.S. doing sending money? Anyway, I guess we're doing it now, aren't we? U.S.A.
Yeah, ain't nothing changed from then till now. Exactly. We just send a lot more money.
Right.
So, bigger ships.
Yeah. You've got the United States, which in this book is in the midst of a slow collapse, which means as things go on, they've got no money left to pay for anything. But you know what they do? They have money to send to the Ukraine. I mean, somewhere else. I don't know. Who knows? But they have money to send, somewhere to Israel or something. I don't know. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And I like how Ayn Rand sets up these contradictions over and over and over again. Like, we can't afford to pay our own people, but you know what we'll do? $50 billion here, 50 billion. Well, it was probably 50 million back then, right? But so there was one note that I wrote about this, especially in these chapters, but I can't remember exactly where it happened, but I really like Ayn Rand's use of urban decay that also illustrates the decay of society. It was early on in this three chapter set that Dagny went to, I think it was a warehouse or I don't know what it was exactly. And she seen an old machine that had stopped working because nobody had touched it in years. And the entire thing was just decaying. And doesn't the whole world, as she talked, doesn't it feel like everything's just worn down, broken, and can't be fixed anymore?
Yeah. That was an old locomotive, if I remember.
Okay, that's what I knew. It was something. It was something they were looking to, I don't think it could even be run anymore because it had been, I guess the idea was just basically neglected to death, right?
Yep.
All right. So what do I got? I got 3 or 4 questions here that I kind of wrote down. But so one was, there was an interesting, actually something we didn't talk about, but Dagny's brother, what is his name again? Is it Jim?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim. Okay. So Jim has himself a mistress, or maybe not I guess she's a mistress. Remember, they're sleeping together in there. And
well, he's not married officially, so
okay. So it's a girlfriend or
whatever
whatever.
you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're absolutely miserable. And there's a line in there, and it goes like this. Ayn Rand says, they heard men and women were supposed to sleep together, so they did. No real feelings at all. Is that a good, do you guys, either of you can chime in, but is that kind of how Ayn Rand views people who don't have a purpose? Do you know what I mean? Because like she looks at those both people as losers, right? Yeah. And they're just going through the motions.
Yeah, they're just not takers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I can definitely see that, where they're there just to do their thing, and who the hell cares?
Yeah. Because that's
lucky to get lucky.
Right. And they did it because they heard other people did it. You know, that's what people are supposed to do. And there was no real, you know, she was like, oh, take me to a party, take me out to this, take me out to that. And he's like, I got to go to work. And they just did things not because they wanted to, or not because they were driven to, but just because that was the thing they were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they want to go get the, I forget what it was, some kind of food that she wanted.
Yeah, that's right. Was it Thai food or
something out of the ordinary?
Yeah, I don't know. She's like, take me to this restaurant. And there seemed to be no passion in what they were doing. They were just existing.
They're just following the crowd.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that leads me into the next question. And again, it was, so is this Ayn Rand's view of looters? And I like this, but it said, everyone hoped someone else would vote against it, talking about the dog eat dog proposition. And it said everyone else was hoping that someone else would do something. Everybody waited around. Basically, I took it that she meant looters were people who of inaction. And what's the opposite of a looter? What does she have a term for what the good people are, or not?
I don't think so.
Yeah. We'll call them doers for now, but you know, doers were people of action, and the looters were people of inaction. That's how I. To
me, are just another thing for. They'll just be calling them sheep. I mean,
sheep, sure. Producers. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Sandy.
That'll work.
We need to get Sandy on here sometime. We'll have to twist around and see if she can on. So, but yes, producers. That's great. I like that. And looters are the people who stand around with their hand out. They're the other countries that are taking the welfare payments. They are the people who stood by while everyone else voted against or in favor of this dog eat dog, pact or collectivism or whatever. And I think, we start to see one thing you'll realize in this book is that there's no such thing as a throwaway line. Even though there's 60 some hours of sitting and listening, the entire time, every time she puts something in there, there was thought behind it. It's never just I'll write this for the sake of writing it. There's always, okay, here's another little piece of my philosophy, right?
Yeah, she just wasn't filling space.
Right. And that's hard to believe that because what did we read? Was it 20 years she worked, or was it 8 years? Anyway, it was about a decade, wasn't
47 to 57 or 40
there
something
you go. So,
to 57.
Yeah.
About 10 years to work on her magnum opus or whatever. So that was, All right. Now, where is it here? So there was, during the discussion, Dagny and Hank Reardon, they had a discussion when she was coming back to him and saying, hey, I really need this Reardon medal. And he says, yep, 9 months. And he starts, waxing eloquently like he likes to do about his medal. And he says, just think about it. Think about chicken wire. It's going to be 2 cents a mile and it's going to last forever. I thought, oh, that's, to me right there is, again, Ayn Rand's view of pure capitalism. And I like that. And then he says something like, imagine buying something at the dollar store, or I believe he says like the 5 and dime, that will last generations. You could hand it down to your family and it would still be working. And that caught me off guard because I thought there ain't nothing you're going to buy at Dollar General that you're going to hand down to your family other than maybe, Slim Jims that fell behind the back of the
Twinkies.
Twinkies or Slim Jims. They might last forever. So here's my question. Is that because of, it's a loaded question, but so the fact that we can't buy things at a dollar store that would last us the entire, our entire life, is that a function of capitalism, a failing of capitalism, or is that because of government intervention trying to balance out the market all the time? Where do we land on this, folks?
It's a loaded question.
I know it is.
That could be all three.
Yeah.
I know it could.
Well, yeah, it's technically all three, but I'm going to go with the first one, that it's a function of capitalism.
Yeah.
Because
repeat customers.
You need customers. All right. So for those that don't know, I play video games. I'll admit it.
Wholeheartedly. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Yeah, so, whatever.
We have an Xbox Series X, so it's the new one.
Sure.
There is a game that I play. Well, there's a game that the oldest plays, which is Minecraft, which is continual. You have to put money into it. Yeah. And there's also Forza Motorsport, which I'm a big race, like a car guy. So yeah, I have the wheel, the seat, the whole 9 yards. And it's fun. So it's literally a simulator, but you have your monthly online.
Yep.
You have your downloadable content for each game. Then you have all the updates that come up. So, I mean, it's continual, and it's going to be continual, but this game is going to be around for 10 years.
Yeah. So that's the same way. I mean, I got lucky, I guess last year, and got lucky, found a PS5.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
For a retail price on Amazon. My brother got the lead, but it's one of the digital downloadable ones. So, I mean, everything I had to, they've got me, I'm stuck with mine. I just can't play offline. So,
Yep.
Same way.
I mean, phones are the same way. So Captioner says, and this is a good point. Now, I'd like to, what about planned obsolescence? Because isn't that better for making money? I mean, if you make something that lasts forever, won't you soon be out of business? Now, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, because Hank looked at it not as, hey, because I think the way Hank looked at it, I'm going to make Reardon metal. And yep, I'm going to corner the market on livestock fencing. And when I sell all the livestock fencing, then I'm going to move over to wire mesh for concrete. And then I'm going to move over to rebar for, skyscrapers. And then I'm going to move over, you know what I mean? So I wonder if her view of it was, I'm not, I want to sell everything I need to sell to other people. And some things inherently are going to be, a returning product. People have to come back and get food from you every week or whatever. You can't buy food and it won't last forever. It's just the nature of the game. But right. I think for Hank and for people like this, they're always going to be producers, and they're always going to be looking for the next thing to do.
Mm-hmm. All right. I got to head up, guys. I will be back in a few minutes. I got to get the girls to bed. So
not a problem. We're getting pretty close to the end tonight anyway. So if we don't see you back before we're done, Nate, we always appreciate you, brother.
Yep. I'll catch you guys later.
Take care. And I just want to shout out to B-Man Jay. He what a great dude. I like him. I got to get him on the show soon. I was just thinking about him today, actually. And Sandy says, true, but there is always the possibility of innovation and more people coming into the market. And I think that's where it comes down to is planned obsolescence can work, but a lot of times, and some people will buy, some people want the cheapest, but other people want the best quality. I think that's the beauty of the market.
It's like you compare an SOE to like Condor or,
Sure.
I mean, it's still going to be stuff that my grandkids are going to wear. Hopefully they can look at it and just hang it in the closet and never need it. But, but the packs, the backpacks, and, they're going to use it, I hope.
So here's a really good example of that. If I'm looking at a few different types of bags and I'm like, I don't know what type of bag I'm going to use or what type of bag I want to have, I will buy 2 or 3 cheap ones on Amazon, and I'll try them and I'll test them out and I'll be like, oh, that's the one I like, or this is the one I like. And I know damn well any one of those I've picked up, they ain't going to last a year. They're made out of whatever they are. But you know what? They give me the feel to figure out what I'm looking for. And then you know what I do? When I go to SRF, I spend a couple $100 or more, and I buy the bags from John that I know will last me a lifetime.
Yep.
And so there's always a place for that, right? Because, you know, I love supporting John. I have no problem with it, but I don't want to go spend $400 on a bag that doesn't fit my shoulder right or isn't what I need. You know, sure, could I sell it on the aftermarket? Yeah, I could, but I'd like to test something too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know what's going to fit exactly what you need.
Right. And B-Man J says, I'm tired of the cheap stuff. I'd rather find the old items that I know will last much longer. For sure. I mean, you look at, funny story, but my dad inherited an old pickaxe, or, you know, from his father. And soon after Becky and I had kids, I don't know how old Mackenzie was. He took it out. I was borrowing it from my dad. And this thing was built like a brick shithouse. It would have lasted forever. And the kids were using it, and they were making lines out in the road for like stop and finish lines. Right. They left it out there, and I assume somebody walked off with it. Well, you go to buy one today, those things will break if you hit them against a rock.
Oh, yeah.
And Sumi here says, I still quote my father, though he's long gone. Long after the price is forgotten, you will appreciate the quality. And my dad uses a very similar term. He says simple. He always just says it pays to buy quality. And I appreciate that.
Buy once, cry once. I mean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Captioner says, I like the idea of innovation, and I don't like the idea of planned obsolescence because it seems so wasteful. But it does seem like the idea has taken over. I'm really interested in how to combat that.
Oh, the TV market is a prime example of that.
Oh, how about phone market?
Oh, yeah. I think the TV started it all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just we take electronic scrap at waste at work or old electronic items. And 90% of the TVs made from probably mid 2000s and older work. Anything new or plasma? No, they don't work.
Isn't that something?
There's people coming all the time. Oh, this only lasted a year. This is 2 years old. The other they bring in the console TV from 82 and it still works. I mean,
B-Man J says, as seen on TV. Do you ever see those as seen on TV stores in the malls?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolute junk. Sure it is, you know? So I want to touch on this where Captioner says, what can we do to combat it? Well, number one, it costs money to combat it, and that's okay. But I'm always bragging up on Reddit. I don't love Reddit, but there's a lot of good resources on there. And there's a subreddit on Reddit called Buy It for Life. It's like r/Buy It for Life. And that's where I found about the Easy Does It can opener that I have upstairs.
Oh, that's a great can opener.
Oh, and I'm wearing Darn Tough socks, the ones with a lifetime warranty. Found those on there as well. And they are, oh man, they'll last forever, you know? And if they don't, they'll replace them. And Captioner says, actually, maybe producing quality works better for smaller producers. I'm going to put it out there and I'm going to say, I think making quality works in the market because what's cool about it is somebody like John Willis isn't going to sell 10 million of his bags at Walmart because nobody wants, those people don't want to pay. Looters don't want to pay $400 for an over-the-shoulder bag. But people who know the benefit and value of quality will. And that's where the market is. But there's lots of people who will go to Amazon or Walmart and buy an over-the-shoulder bag for $17.50 and be happy with it. So,
they're be happy to buy one every year.
Yep, exactly. And end up costing them even more in the long run, you know?
Yeah, they just don't realize it.
I had one more question here. Oh, no, two things. There's another statement here, and I really like this one. So this one takes place when they're all kids again, and it's one of the flashbacks to when Francisco was a kid visiting. And Francisco looked at James one day, and he said, sometime, once you get older, you're going to realize or need to learn that words have exact meanings. And I love that phrase because in this entire book, how often do we get that political doublespeak? You know, that everybody just keeps talking, but they never really make, they'll use words to mean anything, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's politics. How true is that today, Byron?
Oh, very true. I mean, I think they think the more the political people think the more words they say, the better off they are.
Absolutely. You watch. Oh yeah.
The local government's even horrible. I mean, because I work for local government, it's just
poor Byron.
Oh, it's horrible trying to deal with listen to the political side of it, to our our elected officials. So.
Oh my God, Becky, see, here you go. Speaking of the government, Becky just said, turn your backlight off. We have an emergency alert for the grids. Came through like an apocalyptic siren on the phones. I don't think, man, I can't believe mine. Oh yeah, there it is. Emergency alert. This is an Alberta emergency alert issued by the FEMA organization. Extreme cold resulting in high power demand has placed the Alberta grid at high risk of rotating power outages this evening.
Rotating.
Wow, dude, we are in rough shape. Tonight will be the last. Anyway, but yeah, so there you go. Talking about government doing what government does best, right? Yeah. So B-Man says, missed the start of the show. What book? This is Atlas Shrugged. This is chapters 4 through 6. And yeah, so I can't believe that siren didn't go off. Usually mine will just, oh yeah, you would have loved it.
Yeah, scared the shit out of you. You'll throw your damn phone across the room.
Because I got my ringer off, but it still comes through even when the ringer's off, right? But whatever. All right, I got one more question for you there, Byron. And tell me what do you think Ayn Rand's personal views on relationships are? And I know this is a tough one because she had a husband in real life, so she obviously loved him. But does she? It's hard because she obviously sees value in relationships, but at the same time, she almost has a transactional view to him as well. Like
it's just something you do. Yeah, she's almost viewed. Well, you can see she values it, but otherwise she's like, well, as long as you have somebody with you, or
right.
Yeah,
it's I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's an answer for that. If Sandy's still in here, I'd love to hear her thoughts on what Ayn Rand's beliefs on relationships were. And maybe there's a lot of recordings out there of her, but I think when reading what she talks about, she talks about relationships and how they're selfish in nature. And she didn't mean that in a bad way, but what she meant is that if each person were in it for their, I'm going to say this, it's going to sound bad, but if each person is in it for their own good, there it is right there. Value for value. Again, everything is, she takes a market approach to it, but so here's my look on it. If, you marry an imaginary woman or whatever, and they're not looking out for your needs and you're not looking out for their needs, well, it's going to be pretty miserable pretty quick, right? And so if they're not giving you value and you're not giving them value, then why are you together? And some people say, well, for love. Well, how far does love take you if the two of you are incompatible or not giving each other what they need, right?
Right.
So here's Sandy says, you choose a partner based on your values, the one who reflects your highest ideals. Absolutely. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. And like Jeff said, value for value. And I think probably that's when it comes down to, that's where Ayn Rand comes at everything, is a market value for value kind of exchange. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of concept, I would say. So where do you think we're heading here from, I mean, I know we can't really, I don't want to spoil anything, right? But
right.
Okay, let's go back. Since you popped in, I just saw Rachel Brown. She said, no, Nate. Nate was in till 8:00 or 7:00 my time, and he had to leave for his kids. But what were your thoughts on the happenings in this week's sections?
It's pretty good. I mean,
you enjoyed?
The takeover, the Mexican takeover, was kind of pretty. Was something you didn't really anticipate reading about, because that's fun. You would see something more modern, but to me, that's more of a modern takeover thing than more thought, because she didn't really go into detail at the time about why they done it.
Right. What did you think about that? The fact I loved, I mean, it was such a a hammer over the head to socialism or communism, but it was just, hey, here's the government. We're going to take it and you're going to like it.
Yeah.
And they got nothing for it. Right. It was so funny. And I think it starts to get implied that that Francisco planned it, or at least he knew what was going to happen,
Yeah. As in, that he knew what was going on.
Well, let me ask, let's finish up with this tonight then. So when you first read this, how many years ago was it that you read Ayn Rand?
It's been 10, 11 years. It's a while.
Do you remember how you came to it, or why you started reading it by any chance? Or
I was actually in a local or state prepping group, actually. We had like a localish chapter. And then we were just reading, we were talking about books, and that was one of the books we decided to read. Okay. Kind of like now, we just didn't do the video chat.
Sure. Yeah, it was just a get together.
The good days of forums.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Man, where did they go all of a sudden, But
that was also one of the books that we didn't want to mail around to people.
That you didn't, or did?
No, because it was so big.
Yes.
We didn't want to, I've still got, I can't think of the name of it. Something. We was to mail books around each other.
So Cold War Prepper says in 1968 it was mandatory reading in high school. I'm going to venture to say that if you forced your kids to read Atlas Shrugged today, I think there would be I think it would be seen at from the left as a horrible thing.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think? You think there are so many times that I'll just catch, quote unquote, educated people on the left, perhaps, or whatever. I don't call myself on the right either. We're, at least me, I'm an anarchist, so I don't really care. But typically in this instance, it tends to be people from the political left, and they're always shitting on Ayn Rand and they call her, like somebody who somebody who thinks things are perfect. They don't actually look at life and see how things aren't easy,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say if it were forced upon people to be read today, I would think that there would be a bit of an outcry, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah. They'd be the first parent, the first Karen, the mom Karen, we standing at the school board office the next morning.
Oh yeah.
Complaining about it.
I didn't know this, but Michael Sparks says the Tuttle twins, and that's the Libertarian kids book series, has one all about Atlas Shrugged. I would love to get my kids to read it. I don't know. I know Charlotte wouldn't read it yet, and she's a big reader, but this is a deep, long, hard read for sure.
Yeah, it's almost one of the ones you want kids read. You do it during the summer.
Tim Riley said they were talking last night on Tag and Be Live that we should all write in John Galt for president. That's great. Anyway, I'm always too busy doing other shit to bother going and voting. You know how it is, right? But it is a great idea. I do like that idea. So, well, I think we covered it. There wasn't a ton in these 3 chapters, but I was hoping to kind of keep this to just over an hour for people. A lot of times we run these episodes and we, we get carried away or get drinking some bourbon and we're 2.5 hours, and makes it hard for people, But yeah, I can't even ask you for predictions because we kind of know what's going to happen, don't we?
Oh yeah.
But yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it here, guys. This was a good episode. Thank you, Byron. I know you come on late, and I know Nate had to drop off, but it ended up coming together quite nicely. So before they turn my power off, I guess. But everybody know, before I forget, that I found out today that I am going to be speaking at the Mountain Preparedness Festival in Harmony, North Carolina, the first weekend in North Carolina. In North Carolina. What a night. The first weekend in May. Geez, Tim, time to go to bed. So it'll be good. Yeah. But we'll be back in a month. We will do chapters 7, 8, and 9. And if anyone else would like to be part of this, I always post we have a Telegram group for the book club. And we can just chat along here, guys. So we appreciate you. We had a great crew. I think we topped out at 20 tonight, which is awesome.
That's pretty good.
For what is -46 Saturday night, Alberta. So, as always, stay happy, stay healthy.